I'm Dr. Stein. I know some of you. I'm a neurologist. I've been practicing in Sarasota since 1993 and started doing cannabis medicine 2.5 years ago after Amendment 2 passed and made that legal in Florida. A lot of my neurology patients over the years asked about cannabis. Many of them were self-medicating to help with things like multiple sclerosis, muscle stiffness, or cancer-related pain. So when there became an opportunity to be part of the legal cannabis medical practice, I joined in enthusiastically, and it's been extremely gratifying. Many patients with neurological conditions have less than optimal results with conventional Western pharmaceuticals. And cannabis, as a natural alternative, works quite well for lots of different things. Tonight we're going to talk about sleep disorders and how cannabis therapy can help patients who have difficulty with sleep. Sleep science is actually a subspecialty of neurology, sleep medicine we call it. And when patients have trouble with sleep, it may not always be easy to figure out what the problem is. And so there's a fancy test called a PSG, a polysomnogram, where doctors that specialize in sleep medicine have the patient sleep in the laboratory, and we record their brain waves and muscle activity and eye movements actually over 2 nights. That's a PSG or polysomnogram. Has anybody here ever had one of those? Yeah,
I did a sleep study.
You did
but
a sleep?
It was just a belt around me.
Okay.
I did it at home.
Okay, so that would be a sleep study light, I guess.
Yeah, mine was just 1 night.
Yours was 1 night, but you slept in the laboratory?
Yes, I slept in the lab.
They put the electrodes and everything? Sure. Sometimes 1 night is enough, but you know, when you sleep in a strange place in a laboratory with a bunch of wires, is the information going to be relevant to...
Sleep well.
Right, you don't sleep well. So sometimes they'll tack on the 2nd night, but maybe you did fine. So sleep science is super interesting, and it's something that I think is underappreciated. You know, sleep is so important to human physiology, and yet 30% of Americans, it turns out, have some problem with sleep. Now, why is sleep important? Why do we sleep? Anybody have any scientific type answers about that? Why do we sleep?
To heal your body.
To heal your body, we have to rest our muscles, right? The heart rests when we sleep, our blood pressure goes down. There's some specific types of healing that take place in the brain that I'm excited to share with you. Anybody else? It's super important for memory consolidation. When we sleep, we consolidate memories, and what that means basically is that short-term memories or recent memories are changed into long-term memories while we sleep. And some of the information that's in that short-term or immediate memory part of the brain is discarded, and it's not stored as long-term memory. So we have to consolidate our memories, and sleep is huge for that. I can tell you that sleepless nights as a med student did not work well for taking tests the next day, unless you go through a few cycles of sleep before the test. So it's always better to, for example, cram to study and then sleep for a couple hours and then take the test, than, for example, sleep and then cram and then take the test. Because that sleep actually helps consolidate the memory so you can perform better on the test, but you have to go through a full cycle of sleep in order for that to happen. Now, how long does it take to cycle through sleep? And what does that mean? Well, you may have heard of sleep stages. Some of you may know about REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. And then there's light sleep and deep sleep. So there's 2 basic categories of sleep, REM sleep and non-REM sleep. REM sleep is the part with the rapid eye movements. Non-REM sleep is everything other than that. starting with mild or light sleep, and then deeper sleep, and then the third stage, which is slow wave sleep, or N3 we call it, prior to REM. And to go through the whole cycle of the 3 non-REM stages and then REM usually takes about 90 minutes in an adult. And so my med student buddies and I would cram, and then we would sleep for 90 minutes so we could go through one cycle. At least theoretically, that was supposed to help. So there's that. Children, it turns out, babies, cycle faster. They get into REM much faster. And as we age, the relative amount of time we spend in the different sleep stages changes over time. And there's actually a difference between men and women as they age. It's super interesting, I think. But sleep is important to consolidate memories and heal the body. One of the new discoveries about how sleep heals the body has to do with a structural system in the brain that was not discovered until 2012. Imagine that, you know. For centuries, scientists have been studying brain structure under the microscope, and initially, of course, drawing pictures, and like Ramon y Cajal did, and then more recently, of course, using advanced techniques. But you'd think that the anatomy of the brain would have been elucidated already. Well, no. It turns out that there was a completely new structural system in the brain identified in 2012 by my alma mater, University of Rochester colleagues. And the reason that it was so hard to identify this system structurally up until then was because it's only visible in the living person or a living animal. Once the animal, laboratory animal or human perishes, you can't visualize that system. You can't see it. And it only really functions during sleep. So people might come in to get certain brain imaging techniques, and we would look for some things like that during the day, and you might not even see it. So let me tell you about this system. It's called the glymphatic system. G, lymphatic. You've heard of the lymphatic system, the lymph nodes that we have in our bodies, the spleen, the thymus, all of these organs and pipes in our body called the lymphatic system are important for clearing toxins out of our bodies and helping to fight pathogens. So the lymphatic system partners with the circulatory system and the immune system to protect us from pathogens. That's why you get swollen lymph nodes when you're sick. There's an immune reaction. And also clean away debris from our circulatory system. So you clean away those proteins you don't need, other types of waste in our blood, and that is achieved by the lymphatic system. So in the brain, there are these cells called the glial cells. And the glial cells create a network of space around the blood vessels. And when it was discovered by these researchers, they coined the term glymphatic, because it's glial cell doing the job of the lymphatic system. What they found was during sleep now, the glymphatic system is active to clear debris in the brain. This is a huge discovery. Up until then, we knew that spinal fluid, which is the clear fluid that circulates around the brain, was important for cleaning debris, abnormal proteins, and other microscopic nonsense that we don't need. But now we have found that this lymphatic system actually works in a much more robust way than the spinal fluid during the daytime to wash away abnormal proteins and protect the brain from pathogens and things like that. What kind of proteins might it clear away from the brain that you don't need? Well, there's a type of protein called amyloid. Some of you may have heard about beta amyloid, which is the protein that's responsible for neuronal injury in patients with Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease patients.
Hail Satan.
Okay.
Just for the record, that was not like my subconscious saying that, because on the video it may seem like that. That was my alter ego. No, that was an uninvited intruder. So the glymphatic system clears debris, including beta amyloid, which is an abnormal protein that collects in the neurons of patients with Alzheimer's disease. Amyloid proteins also collect in Parkinson's and to some degree in other neurodegenerative conditions. So this is huge. If you don't sleep and your glymphatic system isn't working, you're going to be at risk of developing problems with your nervous cell function due to accumulation of abnormal proteins. You don't get that type of hygiene that you need. Just learned about this in 2012. And the memory consolidation and all the other restorative things that happen when you sleep. So sleep is huge. You have to sleep. If you don't sleep, you're going to be in trouble in a number of ways. Patients are known to have a higher risk of heart attack and stroke if they don't sleep well. For example, patients with obstructive sleep apnea who snore, seriously snore, and I'm smiling a little because I think I might actually have this problem myself. Because my wife's always kicking me to push me over on my side. Because usually patients with obstructive sleep apnea, when they lie on their back, their airway is compromised by the soft tissues behind the tongue and blocks out the airway. And then you'll cough or snore, and then you move on your side and it's a little less obvious. But if you're not sleeping well because you have a problem with airflow, you okay, hon?
Yeah.
If you're not getting enough oxygen, your airflow is impaired, you're not sleeping, you're having multiple awakenings because of this, those patients are at risk for heart attack and stroke, it turns out. So sleep is important. So why do people have problems with sleep, and how can we help them get better sleep? Well, there's a couple of large categories. One is trouble with sleep due to other problems. So let's say, for example, you have really bad pain due to, arthritis in your hip or your neck or somewhere in your body. You have a pain problem. Bless you, Gesundheit. If you're in pain and you can't sleep, you have trouble sleeping due to pain. That's a separate problem. If you're anxious and you get into bed and the hamster wheel keeps turning in your head and you can't stop it, you might not be able to fall asleep because you're preoccupied. Or let's say you had too much coffee, or the alcohol that you had with dinner didn't agree with you. These are all conditions that interrupt sleep. There's other conditions. Restless leg syndrome is a very common cause of sleep problems, where people get into bed and they have this urge to move their legs, and it's really intense, and they have to get up and walk around to get some relief, and then they get back into bed and maybe they can fall off to sleep. And so that's another condition that can interrupt sleep. Then there's problems with sleep itself. Trouble with maintaining sleep due to a problem with the way the circadian rhythm or your own body's rhythm is disrupted. So there are some individuals that have conditions that we call parasomnias. Parasomnias are sleep disorders that are not due to other problems, they're due to problems with sleep. And they cause things like a sleep disorder where you kick or act out your dreams in the middle of the night. It's awful. You can hurt yourself and your bed partner, seriously. Patients with Parkinson's disease sometimes will have that condition, and it's called a REM sleep disorder because it happens just during REM sleep. When you're having a REM sleep, which is part of the very important restorative phases of sleep, it's fine. REM stands for rapid eye movement, and it's the last stage in the cycle of sleep. So you're lying there, and your eyes are moving back and forth, and you're actively dreaming. That's REM sleep. But your body is paralyzed. Patients with REM sleep are lying there still, except for their eyes that are moving back and forth, and the mind is at work processing memories and creating dreams.
Oh my gosh.
That's all right. Imagine if you were not paralyzed the way you're supposed to be. You would act out your dreams. You would fight that person or dive off or try to fly, whatever your dream is. And that type of REM sleep disorder is very prevalent in patients with Parkinson's disease, and it's effectively treated with CBD, it turns out. Cannabidiol, one of the main cannabinoids in the cannabis plant. We have studies showing that CBD, and you need to get up to 50 or 100 milligrams, so you need high dose CBD, helps patients with that particular type of sleep disorder.
Is that per day, like 50 to 100
Yeah.
per day?
Mm-hmm. And I can give you the reference, the article.
Before you go to sleep?
Mhm.
Okay.
The article is really interesting with that too, so if you'd like, you can email me and I'll send you the reference. So that's just one type of sleep disorder. Patients with restless legs, I was mentioning earlier, and patients with anxiety do well with THC-based cannabis products. So, you know, the cannabinoids in the cannabis plant come in lots of different shapes and sizes. There's THC, which is the psychoactive part, delta-9 THC. That's one part of the plant. There's CBD, which is cannabidiol. Everybody's heard about that. That's the non-psychoactive part. And there's other cannabinoids. There's other molecules in the cannabis plant also that are important. Terpenes are those molecules in the plant that give the aroma to the plant, the smelly molecules, terpenes. Because, you know, THC and CBD have no aroma. So when you smell that smell, as they say in the Lynyrd Skynyrd song, you're actually smelling the terpenes that are burning off on the cannabis plant. Terpenes are super important for the unique characteristics of a given plant. You know, some cannabis will relax you, and historically we use the term indica for that. And other cannabis varieties will elevate you, and historically we use the term sativa, but the differences between indicas and sativas were really all about the terpenes, not about the THC or CBD. For example, there's a terpene called myrcene, M-Y-R-C-E-N-E, which is an aromatic molecule that is also present in mangoes and is very relaxing. So cannabis varieties that are high in myrcene, which is very popular in the United States, will help relax you. There's a cannabis terpene called limonene, which is also present in, you guessed it, lemons, that has that citrusy aroma, and that's why certain marijuana smells citrusy. And that particular terpene is more of an elevating compound and energizing, and that's more characteristic of sativa varieties.
Level dose?
No. CBD at high dose is extremely safe. There are some people that are sensitive to CBD. It can cause stomach upset. In smaller doses, CBD can actually be alerting. It's not usually a relaxant. It usually actually alerts folks. So there's a common misconception that CBD is a sedative cannabinoid. That's not true from the studies that we have. So yes, CBD can actually alert you, which you don't want when you're getting ready to go to bed. But at the higher doses in those patients that are able to get to sleep, it reduces that REM sleep disorder.
So what I just heard you say is that it could keep you awake?
Yeah, so that's, yes. So CBD alone can have an alerting property to it. That's why you need to use THC with it. So when we do cannabis medicine, we take our cannabinoid molecules, CBD, THC. There's also cannabigerol, CBG, cannabichromine. There's others. We take our cannabinoid profile and our terpene profile, and we try to design a cannabis medicine that won't keep you awake, but will have the benefit that you want. So for that situation where you want the CBD, but you don't want it to keep you awake, you need to throw in some THC that has myrcene in it, THC and myrcene, and that counteracts the CBD effect, plus the alerting effect of the CBD.
Now,
Well, yeah, you can try that. You can try that, but if you want to reduce if you want to reduce that REM sleep behavior disorder, it may not work. It may be metabolized. Normally, CBD for the most part is metabolized every 8 hours or so. You have to take it twice a day for things like epilepsy control. So it will get metabolized. Thank you for those questions. So there's terpenes, there's cannabinoids. We try to design the treatment, and I think I was going to make another point, but I think you all are getting the picture. You know, there's sleep disorders that are unique to sleep. There's problems with sleep due to other issues like anxiety or pain. And when it comes to using cannabis medicine to help patients with these types of conditions, we first want to identify what is the problem, and then design a treatment to help with that. You know, if it's anxiety, for example, which is the most common reason why people have trouble falling asleep, there's something called sleep hygiene that's very important. So we want those individuals first to avoid napping after 3 p.m., avoid alcohol if possible, or minimal alcohol if you can't avoid it entirely. Caffeine needs to be avoided. Only get into bed when you're ready to sleep or have sex. You don't want to lie in bed and watch TV or use other electronic devices, so you're only in bed for those two things. Lie in bed for 30 minutes and try to fall off to sleep. If you can't, then get up and sit in a chair and read. So these are sleep hygiene maneuvers that, without adding medicines that may have side effects, can oftentimes improve sleep hygiene. Meditation and exercise are super important for lots of anxiety-related sleep disorders. I oftentimes recommend a small amount of exercise after dinner, even if it's just going for a walk to clear your head. Writing down your issues for the next day before you get into bed so you can get them out of your head and onto the pad so you don't ruminate about it when you're lying in bed. You know, these are all important, safe, and relatively easy things you can do. But if that doesn't work, there's cannabis. And I am here to tell you that cannabis works great for inducing sleep. Patients who need help falling asleep almost uniformly do well with cannabis therapy. Now, it may take a little tweaking of the dose, right? Because depending on your tolerance for cannabis, you may need a higher dose or a lower dose of THC and CBD, usually with a terpene profile that includes myrcene, and another terpene called linalool, which is in lavender. And in cannabis plants, the linalool provides a calming effect. So we do really well inducing sleep with cannabis. If you're inhaling cannabis as a smoke or a vapor, the benefit of that treatment usually wears off after about 3 hours. So some patients will do great using cannabis to fall asleep, and then 3 hours later they wake up. And so some of those individuals have to reach for their vape pen and take another hit or two on their cannabis, and poof, they're back to sleep again. Perfectly safe. Perfectly safe. Some individuals like to take a hit or two on their pen or pipe so they fall off to sleep, but before they fall off to sleep, they take an edible. So what happens when you swallow cannabis as an edible, it takes about 90 minutes or so, maybe 60 to 90 minutes for the effect to kick in, but then the effect of the cannabis lasts for 6 or 7 hours. So the vape or smoke will help you get to sleep, and then when that wears off, the edible kicks in and helps you stay asleep. So we have a lot of success with that strategy. And again, the edible or, capsule or gel cap, whatever it is that you're swallowing cannabis, it has to have the right ratio of CBD to THC and hopefully the right terpene profile. But a lot of the recommendations that we make along those lines are based on experiments in the laboratory. We don't have a lot of controlled studies in humans with these different compounds. We do have, in the case of that Parkinson's study with CBD, and we have some other dosing guidelines from studies in humans. But a lot of what I'm sharing with you has to do with preclinical or laboratory evidence. Because of cannabis's Schedule I status in the United States, we haven't been able to do a lot of studies on it. But they're getting done in other countries, and we have that data. So I think that's a sort of a 20,000-foot view of sleep medicine. Diagnose, treat with lifestyle changes if possible, and when that fails, go to the cannabis, because the other agents that people are using to help them fall asleep, Xanax, alprazolam, clonazepam, these benzodiazepines they're called, they are not good for you. If you're having panic attacks and you're in acute, you're suffering with acute reactive anxiety, sure, you can use Xanax for a few days or a few weeks, but for chronic therapy, if you can't fall asleep, you don't want to take benzodiazepines like that for any more than a few weeks. Your body builds up a tolerance to it, and then you become dependent on it. It also affects the quality of your sleep, and it's not good. Same thing with the antidepressants. A lot of patients, and I'm part of the Western medical machine that uses antidepressants like trazodone, very popular tricyclic antidepressant that we use to help patients get to sleep. Well, in older patients, it can cause real problems. It can cause real problems, more confusion, falls during the middle of the night, dry mouth, constipation, confusion. So, those pharmaceuticals that everybody's using, the hypnotics, Ambien, Lunesta, these are sedative hypnotic agents. All of these different options for how you want to treat insomnia have their side effects. And of all the things that I've been working with over the years, I'm really happy to have cannabis in the armamentarium to offer to patients. It's a safe and effective alternative. So I think I'll stop there and take questions if anybody has any questions.
Which, I guess, category would you consider like a sleep disorder? If you fall asleep, I don't have much of an issue falling asleep, but when I am asleep, I feel like I'm awake in my dreams, basically, and then I wake up sometimes, I'll use the bathroom and I go back to sleep, and I literally can go back to sleep in the same dream sometimes. And I feel like I know it's a dream, I'm awake, but I'm still sleeping. If that makes any sense.
I'm confused.
I feel like, yeah, I know, it's confused, it sounds confusing.
Run it by me again.
I'm sleeping, but in my dream, I know that it's a dream, and I know that I'm, I try to wake up, I guess, out of it at some points, but I have, recurring dreams. I've had, recurring dreams since I was a kid. And I've tried, tons of different things. I've tried, it happens even if I do smoke or if I don't smoke it.
Do you wake up feeling refreshed?
No. I wake up feeling just as tired as I went to sleep because I don't feel like I slept because I was so awake in my dreams. It doesn't happen every night, but it happens here and there.
That's interesting. I was going to say it's okay because, when you're dreaming and you have that moment of awareness that, okay, I'm dreaming and this is a cool dream.
Right.
And no, it's disruptive.
Yeah.
So it's disruptive.
I know that it's because I know that it's a dream. And it's literally happened since I was a kid, I can remember. It's happened to me a lot when I have high fevers.
Okay.
But as I've gotten older, I am more aware of it. And there's some nights it doesn't happen at all, and there's other times it's I feel like I'm fully awake the entire time I'm asleep.
Do you have movements at night?
I don't, not that I know of.
Okay.
Yeah, but is that part of REM sleep? Am I REM sleeping during that, or is that not REM sleep?
Well, it is because you're dreaming.
Right, okay. So when you are dreaming, that is REM sleep.
Yes, that is REM sleep.
Okay.
And if you have some conscious awareness of the dream as it's going on, that in and of itself is not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's disrupting your sleep pattern enough to cause daytime sleepiness or unrestful sleep, then you may need to, well, I don't know. I think you stumped me. The first one, I'm stumped. But you know, cannabis therapy is something you've experimented with, or?
Yeah, I've met, obviously like my own. I live in New York. I grew up down here, so I'm down here for a little bit. So I know I've like self-medicated, and it happens whether I do or I don't. I haven't smoked anything or taken anything in over a month, and it still happens.
And when you do medicate, are you doing any edibles or just vaping?
Just vaping.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't tried the vaping and edibles, but like you were saying before, like I'll sleep for a few hours and then I'll wake up and then I'll vape again and then go back to sleep. But it doesn't happen every single night. So there's really I feel like there's no rhyme or reason to like when it happens and when it doesn't. So I just didn't know if that was like under any specific.
Yeah, you know, actually, cannabis use can sometimes disrupt REM sleep.
Right.
So, you know, we like to use cannabis to induce sleep, but there are studies that show that it can mess with REM sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to say, you know, maybe it's too much cannabis and that's interrupting your
It
REM.
happens even when I take nothing.
Okay. And so then we would have the whole conversation about sleep hygiene and...
Yeah, and I meditate, I do yoga, I eat generally healthy, I guess.
Yeah. I'll have to think about that one. Thank you, though, for sharing that.
No problem.
Yeah,
I would recommend RSO.
Rick Simpson oil. Well, RSO is the term we use to describe whole plant extract, which is a method of extracting all the cannabinoids and other molecules from the plant developed a while back by this fellow Rick Simpson, and it's been improved on since then. But it's a very potent whole plant extract, and it's very effective for sleep.
Yes.
Well, there you go.
RSO.
RSO, you have to be
Whereas
careful.
if I vape, like you said, it just lasts a certain length. But 2 hours before I'm ready for bed, I take this little, it looks like,
It's black oil.
black oil, about
swallow
the
it.
size of a piece of rice.
Yeah, you
Put
got to
that on
go.
a cracker, and I eat that, and I am out all
And
night
you-
long.
And I have to second that, and I was having the same kind of problem, like middle of the night,
Yeah.
and started to concentrate after,
Yeah.
maybe I smoke a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
but then if that concentrate gets you through
Yeah,
the night.
it
Yes,
does.
For me anyway.
Thank you.
Yes, so
Appreciate it.
Thank you. So
I've tried so many. I've had doctors give me 1,000 different things. And
pharmaceuticals.
Tons of
Yeah.
different. Yeah, I mean literally everything under the sun.
So just to summarize, thank you. That's great. So we were talking about how you had sleep disruption enough to cause an unrestful sleep, something to do with the REM cycle, perhaps. Cannabis wasn't helping in the ways that you've tried it, but someone suggested that whole plant extract, which is a potent, thick oil that you swallow, does have a profound effect and can induce sleep that lasts. And you have to be careful with it.
Yeah,
you
what are
know.
the side effects? Are there-
Drowsiness.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I wouldn't wanna get up and have to do something.
Imba-
It
balance.
knocks me out.
It knocks me
For
out.
about how long you said? 8 to 10
Till,
hours?
till the
Oh,
morning.
Right,
yeah.
like when you wake up in the
Good.
morning,
Yeah.
you're rested or you're still like sleepy?
Much more rested. No,
Yeah,
no. I
no,
don't
like
feel
I've
sleepy
slept
by then,
all
yeah.
night
Yeah.
long.
Because I
My
find that
guess
I
would be
like,
like 8 hours.
yeah, I wake up constantly and I'm like, I slept for 6 hours and I'm not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
then you're exhausted in the morning.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
forever sleepy, always.
All right, RSO. So the grain size dose of RSO is usually around, is usually around 20 milligrams of THC. All right. So
How do you get it?
they sell it at the dispensaries.
Oh, okay.
So a very small amount of RSO can have a significant amount of THC. So
Yeah.
20 or 25 milligrams in that much. So
It's a little hard to dose because you take so little
Mm-hmm.
that when you squeeze it out of the syringe, you know, like I put it on a cracker and it's like, okay. Like the first time I tried it, they said start with like a grain of rice, about the size, so I did. Then a couple of hours go by, I didn't feel I took a little bit more.
You were out.
I'm saying, well, maybe they thought long grain rice, you know?
Yeah, right. Is it basmati rice? Or is it...
Short grain rice.
Yeah, I did short grain.
What some people do with their RSO, so we were talking about how RSO can sometimes have, it can be challenging to dose correctly
Yeah.
because it's so concentrated.
It's so potent.
So what some people do is they get their syringe with their RSO in it, and they have these squares of parchment paper, and then you squirt out just a little bit, and throw that in the freezer, so that you have it ready when you need it.
Yeah.
So you don't have to deal with that each time,
Yeah.
and then you can, like, using a tiny spatula type device, you
Yeah.
can mess with it. So
Yeah.
you try to get a consistent dose.
Yeah.
And then I know that some of the dispensaries are creating RSO in capsule form, actually, and with devices that will provide a unit dose. But it's hard because it's so thick.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
keep looking. Give me a call. Maybe I can help you find some of that other options, capsules or whatever.
Does it hurt your stomach by any chance? Like,
No.
Not usually.
No, in fact, I went to it because the vaping hurts my throat.
Right.
Now, here's my dilemma. The good thing about vaping is I could go to say I go to bed at 10:30, and it's like, oh my God, 12 o'clock, I'm still awake. I can vape and have it. Otherwise, around 8 o'clock is when I take my RSO. So there's no, I'm either going to take it or I'm
Right.
not, and it's like in my mind, but I don't want to
Yeah.
be dependent on anything, so I only want to use it when I really need it. But with the RSO, it's like, well, I've got to make that decision, am I going to or not?
Yeah, and I guess for
You
me,
know?
I have very sporadic sleep patterns because where I work at a hotel in New York in the city, so I have all different hours. Sometimes
Yeah.
I go to
Ugh.
sleep at midnight, sometimes I go to sleep at 5 a.m., sometimes I go to sleep at 7. I go to sleep at all different hours.
Well, that
also-
could be your
but
problem.
But I also
Yeah.
find that, like, right now for the last month, I've been going to sleep pretty consistently, like, before midnight, and I've been fully awake in my dreams almost every night.
Okay.
As opposed to when I go to sleep super late,
Yeah.
I guess maybe because I'm vaping more, because I'm like, okay, I'm like
I gotta get to
pushing
sleep,
myself to
yeah.
sleep. I don't have that. It doesn't happen to me as much.
So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Shift workers, people that have irregular sleep-wake cycles in relation to sunlight can have a disrupted sleep.
I go to sleep a lot when it's sunny out, when it's like.
So that's a unique type of
But I wear like a
issue.
shade over my eyes, so it's like, and I try not to do it if I'm going to sleep at night when it's dark, but I do it more when I'm going to sleep if I know that it's going to get sunny, especially in New York. Starts to get sunny out in the morning in the summer.
There's a process, like you said, that you can do. We call it entrainment, where you entrain your own body's circadian rhythm to the light cycle that is whatever, dark and light, light and dark. That's super hard for people to do.
Yeah.
Because it's a biological clock that we each have that actually runs about 24 hours and 20 minutes. It doesn't go exactly 20 minutes, but we entrain ourselves to be awake during the day, most of the day, and asleep during most of the night because of the information that our eyes collect from the sunlight. Behind the eyeballs, there's a nucleus or a collection of nerve cells called the suprachiasmatic nucleus that takes that information from the eyes and connects directly to the pineal gland in the brain, which is responsible for secreting melatonin. And so it's all connected. The light, the connection to the pineal for the melatonin. Cannabinoid receptors are abundant in the area of the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So our own body's cannabinoid system, which is called the endocannabinoid system, has to be functioning well. The reason cannabis works is because we have in our own bodies cannabinoid-like molecules, anandamide and 2-arachidonyl glycerol, that in a normal healthy person function sufficiently to promote health and wellness. But some people have an endocannabinoid deficiency, and they need to have plant-based cannabinoids as a supplement. So that's the sort of the nutshell explanation for why we use plant-based cannabinoids, phytocannabinoids, to supplement our own endocannabinoid system.
Can you measure that deficiency? Or can it be measured? Yeah.
Yes, if you do a spinal tap and take the spinal fluid and measure the amount of anandamide, for example, which is one of the endocannabinoids. And that study was done in migraine sufferers in Italy. And they took 12 or so patients that had chronic migraine and 12 other patients that were getting spinal fluid analysis for other reasons. And they found that in the chronic migraine sufferers, there was a deficiency of anandamide.
I believe it. I'm a chronic migraine sufferer. Been using medical cannabis for 15 years. You don't have to tell me.
You don't need a spinal tap.
Yeah, thanks. I'll say
Okay.
that, but I believe it, yeah.
There's a lot of people that are using serum levels in the blood to measure for anandamide, but I'm not sure that reflects accurately on what's going on in the brain because of the blood-brain barrier. Serum levels don't always represent what's going on in the brain. So that gets a little dicey, but that's how you measure anandamide.
You mentioned Lunesta and Xanax and other things like that. And now you just recently said something about releasing the melatonin in your brain. Well, what about just taking melatonin
Yeah.
by, in the drugstore?
Yeah, so melatonin seems to work for a lot of people as a supplement to help induce sleep. And it's safe, basically. And so I think that's fine. We don't have a lot of objective evidence to know exactly how much to use, but it works. That's why it's out there. And a lot of people use it and it works for them. I think it's a fine remedy.
What dose would you recommend?
I don't know actually off the top of my head. It's not something I recommend too often, but.
Yeah, it didn't work for me.
No, the first time I took it, I had them super wild dreams.
Yeah.
Next level, my mom was like, here, try this. I was
Yeah,
like,
it doesn't
no
work.
Thanks, never again.
So that question was about melatonin dosage and how that might help.
Yeah,
And
it's
so,
like how much you take.
yeah, so that's an option, and it may be worth trying. Yeah, there's other natural ways to help relax the mind and body to get to sleep. Any other questions?
I have
Yes,
one
sir.
more. You mentioned early on, or you explained the need for sleep to heal the body and consolidate memories and so on. How much sleep? I mean, what's the minimum to do those two things especially?
7 hours.
At least 7 hours.
The question was, how much sleep is necessary in order to promote wellness by way of consolidating memories and giving your glymphatic system a chance to kick in? And it changes with age. Newborns and children have a higher requirement. They'll sleep 50% of the day easily. And that's what they require. God bless you.
Thank you.
And as you get older and you become a young adult, it becomes closer to 7 hours, 7 to 8 hours. And then actually as you get older, it changes. Much older. So you still need 7 hours, but there's less slow wave sleep as you get older, especially men have an issue with that. And so the time you spend in the different sleep stages differs as you get older, but you pretty much still need the 7 hours. So that's sort of like the easy answer. There are some other, specific needs depending on, what you're doing during the day and so forth. But in general, 7 hours is the guideline, give or take. And then you need to have it in a 90-minute cycle, so you cycle through REM. Because every time if you start getting into REM and you wake up and you don't have that cycle, you have disruption in that cycle, then you can try to sleep for 7 hours, but it won't be a restful sleep because you didn't go through the whole cycle of the stages.
As far as taking naps, do you suggest that there is a short period of time that you should take a nap if you're going to nap, or
Before 3 p.m.
right before 3 p.m.? What if
Yeah.
you wake up at 11 a.m. or noon?
So then that speaks to this problem with the circadian rhythm. So you have to retrain.
Whatever your rhythm is.
Yeah, no, you have to kind of get with the sun. Yeah, if you can, if you're not a shift worker.
Yeah.
If you can.
Trying.
Yeah, but that staying up late and then waking up late, that's an issue.
Right.
So that needs to be handled, and there's ways of doing that.
And then, so as far as like, what would be considered like a good amount of time to take a nap? Like an hour, 45 minutes? What if 2 hours? Like
90 minutes. You want to cycle. You want to cycle
that's all you
through.
need, right? Okay, see, people always say you should take a 30-minute power nap. I'm like, I don't think that's a power nap.
Well, it depends on how fast you get to REM. Okay, so let me just say this about that. So the question was, how long should your restorative nap be? And my answer was, as long as it includes all the cycles, you're good to go. And that's usually 90 minutes. But there are some people who are sleep deprived that enter REM right away. So imagine going in for your nap, falling asleep, and start dreaming right away. So you have rapid onset REM or early onset REM, and that's a manifestation of sleep deprivation. So we also see that in patients with narcolepsy, which is a fascinating condition we haven't talked about. But the answer is you want to go through the sleep cycles, and that can vary from individual to individual. Usually it's 90 minutes, but for rapid onset REM patients or individuals, it could be less. Thank you.
What happens if you don't dream or remember your dreams? Is that a sign for anything, or? Okay.
The question was, what if you don't dream or don't remember your dreams? I don't think that's I don't think your perception of your dreaming ability represents actually what's going on in your brain, necessarily. Most people don't remember their dreams. It depends on, when you wake up in relation to them, I believe. But chances are you're dreaming. You just don't remember them. So aside from that, the more important thing is getting to the REM sleep. So if you had a polysomnogram and you were in the laboratory, we could record the brainwaves and watch the eye movements, and we can say with certainty, okay, even though you don't remember your dreams, you went through so many cycles of REM, and that we believe is the healthy, watermark you need to reach. Mm-hmm. Whether or not you remember it, I don't think is that important.
Okay, that's good.
If you have literally an entire lifetime of terrible sleep, like child, baby, adult, grad school, everything, is it possible to kind of reverse any damage that could have taken place if you're able to get your sleep hygiene under control? Or are you just kind of whatever's happened has happened and you just have to go from where you're at, if that makes sense?
So the question is, if you have a chronic problem with sleep disruption, are you destined to have permanent problems as a result? So I'm not sure, but I would theorize that there might be some permanent neuronal stuff going on there because, for example, if those amyloid proteins are building up and they are there as a result of your lymphatic system not functioning, now I'm definitely shooting from the hip here, theoretically those proteins could cause problems for you. They won't go away. But there are mechanisms in the brain that clear amyloid. Accumulated amyloid can be cleared. We've seen in the laboratory that cannabis can actually help with that, and we're doing studies in early Alzheimer's to try to reduce amyloid burden. So there's that. Would there be, aside from any structural damage due to chronic insomnia, I'm not sure that we have evidence that there is any permanent damage in the brain as a result of that. But cardiovascular health and sleep health are related. So, theoretically, not so much as a young person, but if you're an older person and you already have other risk factors for cardiac disease, maybe diabetes and obesity, and you're not sleeping well, that could potentially cause problems with your cardiovascular function that may not be reversible. I'm not really sure. It's a good question. We don't really know. Yeah.
Is it safe to take CBD and THC with antidepressant medications?
Yeah, well, the question was, and I'm saying this for our video because I have the microphone on, thank you for asking that. The question is it safe to use cannabis therapy along with antidepressants? And the answer is yes, it is safe to use cannabis therapy and antidepressants, as well as other medications, as long as the liver enzymes that metabolize those medicines are monitored. So, for example, not so much the antidepressants, but things like Coumadin, which is a blood thinner, or fluconazole, which is an antifungal. Those drugs are very sensitive to the liver enzyme function, and cannabis does affect liver enzyme function. Not in a bad way, it just either revs it up or slows it down. So you have to watch for that, for the metabolism. But in general, it's safe to use cannabis therapy and other medications almost across the board. In kids that were studied for epilepsy treatments at GW Pharma over the last 10 years, we learned that there's an anticonvulsant drug called clobazam that, when given with high doses of CBD, results in excessive sedation. But those kids were taking hundreds and hundreds of milligrams of CBD. So for the general public, for the number of milligrams that we're using for our CBD and THC, usually there's no problem with other drugs. That was a long answer, but it's an important question. I think that's it. Well, this is our last in this. No.
How about, does marijuana affect memory?
Yes, of course. Dude, where did I park my car? Okay, so does marijuana affect memory? So the answer is yes, but even though cannabis, THC primarily, does cause problems with short-term memory, that problem can actually be handled by finding a cannabis variety that has pinene in it. Pinene is one of the terpenes that pinene, P-I-N-E-N-E. Pinene is a terpene that is common to pine trees. And what pinene does in the brain is it inhibits the enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine, which is the neurotransmitter that's so important for memory. And that's the one that in patients with dementia is low. So pinene enhances acetylcholine and counteracts the short-term memory difficulty of the THC. Okay. So there's ways of trying to reduce the short-term memory problems, but the answer is yes, cannabis can cause short-term memory issues.
But not long-term?
Not long-term that I'm aware of, but it's connected. Right. So, you create a long-term memory. Every long-term memory was initially a short-term memory. That's true. So there you go. But it wouldn't affect you in terms of retrieving already established long-term memories. I'll say that. Okay. Fair? Very fair. Well, you guys have been a great audience. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I left some cards and brochures there. If you have any other questions, you can reach out to me. I answer all emails. No charge. We'll definitely do that.